The elephant. You take an elephant, and the way they train elephants, you put a iron stake and a chain around their neck as a baby until that baby elephant begins to understand that it keeps pulling and pulling until it begins to lose the ability to begin to pull until it begins to say, what's the use? Because they want to put the stake in the chains in the elephant mind. So now you have this big grown elephant that can knock a building down. But all they do is put a wooden peg and a rope because they've established the chain in the elephant's mind. The only way that elephant will be free if he gets touched with senility and loses his present mind. And bring that to me today. What are you saying, prophet? There's been chains on you for so long until many of you have lost the fight and the ability to climb. You said, what's the use? Because somebody has already put the glass in your mind. Somebody else has put the chain in your mind. So therefore, you're not able to come into your destiny because you still have the psychological blockage. Touch your neighbor and say, you need your mind change. And so many of you say to yourself, I will never be anything, I'll never become anything, because the oppressor, through media, through design, through education, has enslaved you. That though the chains have been taken off the hands, but they were on the hands and feet for so long until the chains are present in the mind. Touch your neighbor and say, take the chains off. One man put it this way, Trotsky said, the struggle of freedom is for all, even the oppressor. Trotsky was the lawyer of Bernard Malamud. The fixer says, in a sick country, every step to health is an insult to those who live on its sickness. There are some people that will be disturbed with this message because they survive on this sickness. We must understand that the oppressed must therefore fight against the oppressor in order to fight for them. You'll never be able to free the oppressor until you free yourself. It's important to them that you become free, because now you free them from the sin that they're committing. Touch your neighbor and say, this is about liberation. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, amen, he says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye what? And how are you transformed? By the renewing of the mind. So therefore, we need to understand as a point, you need to write this down, no liberation without transformation. No liberation without transformation. In other words, there's got to be a continual change. Amen. They tell me that the average home, amen, no doubt will probably look at 5 to 6 hours of television a day. You are being programmed by your oppressors. Any positive black film does not make it and last long on the charts. But anything, amen, that will degrade the African American male will put millions behind that. Amen. The color purple did not show not one positive male image. Hello, are you still here or did you go home? A matter of fact, we need to begin to ask ourselves the question, amen, that when we begin to look at certain things that we are buying into, we must begin to ask ourselves the question, who is setting the agenda? Touch your neighbor and say, it's time for you to free yourself. It gets a little bit more radical. Listen to this next point. There can be no liberation without a commitment of revolutionary action against injustice, slavery, and oppression. Touch your neighbor and say, we're calling for a revolution. Now, don't get nervous. But we want you to understand a little bit, and it's important that we cover a little bit of history for a moment, because if we don't have our griots rehearsing it, our children are going to forget it. We are forced to begin to look at some church fathers or elders in the church or some church statesmen, amen, some men of God of some status that had guts to say, we've got to bring about a revolution. What is it going to take in order for change to come? When we look at this particular congregation, amen, and we look at the mixture, and we look at how God has somehow brought us all together, one of us had one thing in common, is that every one of us has gone through some kind of degree of oppression. Amen. That even if you may say, well, I'm white, the fact that you are here is a signal that you've been rejected also by your own. Amen. And when you begin to understand, you may say, well, I don't understand what you mean, rejected. Amen. The fact that you identify and would have the nerve to call us your brother and sister, there will be some of your loved ones that would say, we've got to have you checked out because we really didn't raise you up. Why couldn't you find a Methodist church? Or a Baptist church? Amen. One particular man of God, amen, which ministry was cross culture. Amen. A white man leading people, thousands of people, and made a statement publicly in a congregation and an assembly, went out on tape across the nation. And it amazes me the ignorance of blacks to still become supportive when they say we worship together and we play together, but we do not marry. And it was shocking to the ears, and some of you have their books on your shelves. And they're monthly supporters. That statement is saying that you are inferior to them. And any man or any message that does not build the self-esteem of the African American male is not the gospel, and it is the spirit of Antichrist. Because it's against the nature of God. We're forced to look at men like Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, and other blacks walked out of St. George Methodist Church in 1787. And by 1816, Allen had become the first bishop in the newly organized church known as the AME Church, African Methodist, amen, Episcopal Church, which they had the sister's church, the AME Zion. And it became an important instrument of the attainment of black freedom during and after slavery. But thank God that some men had the nerve to walk out. They said you can worship, but you can sit in this part of the place where you worship. You can worship, but you'll never be called to